Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to the Rasmussen Reports channel, where we produce the most accurate election prediction polling. And guess what? Later in the video, we're going to back that up with a chart you just can't refute. Now, what are we going to use that accuracy for today? Well, obviously, we're going to be talking more about the 2024 election, but we're also going to talk about the Democrats' highly touted, decades-long plan of building an emerging supermajority out of minority voters and how that could be blowing up in their face. You're definitely going to want to hold on to the end, especially to see the chart about how black voters are trending. But let's talk more about that plan the Democrats had, whether it's being done intentionally or not. And by the way, a majority of U.S. likely voters do think it's intentional. People are pouring across the southern border, the vast majority of them Hispanic. And the common convention in news media is that those people vote blue. That may have been the case, but is it anymore? Or can they even vote to begin with? A lot of people are very concerned that that might be the plan. But let's get into it. Should illegal immigrants be allowed to vote in U.S. elections? And over 1,000 U.S. likely voters say no, absolutely not. It's really rare to see a majority this big. 82% of them say no, but only 9% say yes. 8% aren't sure. So still that 17% is kind of higher than you'd like to see, no? Well, there's not one single demographic that a majority says yes, not even close. Biden supporters, it's about 17, 18%. Here are the party numbers, though, and it is Democrats more than anyone else. 9% of Republicans say yes, which is kind of surprising, but 88% of them say no. Look at that independent number. They're often more open-minded and pay a lot more attention to the polling questions. So that might be what's going on here. Only 3% of independent voters say that illegal immigrants should be voting in U.S. elections. 89% say no. But look at Democrats, 16%, well more than 2-1 over other voters. 71% of them still say no, however. The other demographics are pretty interesting, but unfortunately, you're going to have to be a Rasmussen Reports Platinum subscriber to see those numbers. But the next biggest signal is coming from age, and it's the 18 to 39-year-olds that are most likely than anyone else to say yes. We talked about should they, but could they? Here's the next question. How likely is it that the outcome of the 2024 presidential election will be influenced by illegal immigrants voting? 24% of U.S. likely voters say very likely. 21% say somewhat likely, for a combined total, if you're doing the math, of 45%, almost a majority, and in fact, more voters than who currently say they vote for Biden in a rematch. 20% of voters say not very likely, and another 24% say not at all likely, for 44%. So the electorate is basically split on whether illegal immigrants voting is going to influence the outcome of 2024. But here are the party numbers, and it's more than anyone else. Of course, Republicans. 36% say it's very likely, and another 28% say somewhat likely, for a combined total of, 64% who say it's at least somewhat likely. 12% of Republicans say not at all likely, and another 16% say not very. So that's 28%. So Republicans are more than 2-1. And like all likely voters, independents are split on this one, but even 34% of Democrats say it's at least somewhat likely that illegal immigrants voting is going to impact the outcome of the 2024 election. And only 58% say it's not likely. But this one's extra special if you look at those numbers by race. White and black voters are about equally likely and equally split. But it's Hispanic voters more than anyone else who thinks illegal immigrants voting is going to affect the outcome of the presidential election. 33% say it's very likely, 1 out of 3 Hispanic voters. And another 24% say it's at least somewhat likely, for a combined total of 57%, a very strong majority. Only 1/3 of them say it's not likely, so Hispanic voters are almost 2-1 on this. Now, here's a statement. The Biden administration is, quote, encouraging so much illegal immigration because they want them to become voters to create a permanent majority for Democrats. 43% of U.S. likely voters strongly agreed with that statement, another 14% somewhat, for a combined total of 57%. Again, another very strong majority. Only 37% of voters at least somewhat disagreed with that statement, and only 30% strongly disagreed. But again, who are those people? Republicans, that's kind of cynical. 80% of Republicans agreed with that statement, 65% strongly, and only 15% disagreed. But even among Democrats, it's 36% that think that's the long-term plan. And only 47% of Democrats strongly disagreed. But look at independents. 54%, a majority of independents, think that the Democrat Party is encouraging illegal immigration to create a permanent majority for Democrats. And only 29% of them strongly disagreed with that statement. But now let's get into those presidential election numbers I was talking about. Now, it's incredibly hard to be a pollster where you're measured on the outcome of your horse race polling, when polling has, quite frankly, a pretty wide margin of error, and it fluctuates back and forth all the time. It's a little bit like playing musical chairs, and your accuracy depends on where your polling is when the music stops. Just look at that neck and neck between Trump and Clinton in the 2016 election. Oh, by the way, this is the last 10 years of all of our presidential polling. Now, it was a little less pronounced in Trump versus Biden, but even this time out, there's a really big back and forth swing. But what if I took those numbers and created charts that showed just the 5-period moving average? Now, I picked 5 because that's what seemed to smooth out the cycles the most. But you could take our numbers and put in whatever you wanted. But all of a sudden, it becomes a lot clearer what the true signal is. In 2016, I think it's pretty fair to say that Trump and Clinton were neck and neck. But look at that 2020 chart and the margin that Biden had over Trump. Pretty sure it's fair to say that that accurately reflected what happened in 2020. But before we get into this year, I made a little edit to the chart. I took the actual final margin of the 2016 and 2020 election and stuck them up there. And believe it or not, look at that. I don't think you could get any more accurate as a pollster. Our average of polling almost exactly reflected the final outcomes of the popular vote race. Now, obviously, the final outcome depends a lot on the Electoral College, but that's not what we're using these numbers for today. We're using these to talk about the Democrat permanent majority. And first, let's just look at 2024 here. But first, just look at 2024 here. And I have to tell you, it's the same methodology, the same questions, pretty much the same weighting. Nothing has changed in our polling, and it looks like Biden has lost 12 points on Trump. Now, will he turn it around? Maybe, but this is really far behind to try and catch up from. But look at these numbers for Hispanic voters, and once again, this is the 5-period moving average. The numbers swing a little bit more, but that's because the Hispanic result of our polling is only 13% of the overall polling, and so the margin of error is much larger. But again, a pretty clear picture emerges when you look at the moving averages. In 2016, Trump wasn't doing that great with Hispanic and other race Americans, and Clinton was the winner. According to our numbers in 2020, Trump and Biden were kind of neck and neck, but over the campaign season, Trump pulled ahead. But now look at this year, and Biden has lost almost 10 points of support among Hispanic and other race voters, and Trump has pretty much held even and is now pulling ahead rapidly. Now, I will point out that all of these numbers did at the time aggregate Hispanic and other race Americans. Well, what does that mean? It includes probably a lot of Asians, Native Americans, pretty much anybody who doesn't fit into the big buckets. Of these numbers, Hispanic voters represent about 65% of the overall total, and they do poll a little bluer than Hispanic and other race voters do combined. So the true numbers for Hispanic voters are likely to be closer. Biden and Trump are probably polling at about parity right now, but that is not what the expected outcome of the permanent majority plan was. And it really calls into question the continuing, seemingly intentional invasion of the southern border. But here's what I told you to hang on for. It's all of our polling for Black voters. And unlike Hispanic voters, they aren't lumped in. You're going to see the real numbers here. And here they are with, the 5-period moving average. Now, Trump's not anywhere close to winning among Black voters. But look at that inexorable loss of Democrat support. Hillary Clinton outpolled Donald Trump by about 55 points in our polling. Now, you could say going back and looking at the exit polling of the 2016 election, the Black electorate didn't swing towards Trump that much at all. And I would say maybe, but believe it or not, the sum total of all of our Black voter data points from the 2016 election is more than the number of people they sampled in the 2016 exit polling. And exit polling is renowned for having problems with sample bias. So it's not really fair to say that people truly knew how the sum total of the Black electorate voted in the 2016 election. Maybe my numbers are one bookend and they're the other bookend. But what's important is the change over time. So 55 points in the 2016 election, but Joe Biden only beat Donald Trump in our polling amongst black voters by now 40 points, a 15-point loss. And now looking at 2024, it's even more bleak. Biden is only up 20 points. That's a 35-point swing from just 8 years earlier. So I hope you learned a lot in this video. If you did, please follow us at Twitter at Rasmussen_poll. There you'll be able to download versions of those charts without my face and all this other stuff on it. If you think it's an important message that the Democrats are losing the black vote and have seemingly already lost the Hispanic vote, then make sure you share that chart. Follow us on Twitter at Rasmussen_poll. Please subscribe at YouTube or Rumble and like the video while you're there. And thanks for watching.